In our yesterday session, we understood more about how front-end applications are being integrated by Spring Boot applications. That is what we understood. So that means as a developer, backend developer or Spring Boot developer, once we implemented our REST services, how all those REST services are being integrated by the front-end point of view. We take an user sign-up operation and we understood with respect to React.js how things are happening. So how they are calling the APIs. So as a developer, you no need to worry how front-end people will take care of it. Okay, whenever you are working as a backend developer or you are implementing the REST API based on the requirement point of view, you have to satisfy the requirement. Okay, we have to fulfill the requirement with respect to positive scenarios and negative scenarios, but it doesn't matter for us who is calling the who is going to call that REST API, or how they are writing, or how they are going to implement REST API integration from their side. It's not, we don't need to think about it. Our point of view as a backend developer, for example, if you take in my scenario, whenever I got a requirement, I'll implement a REST service with respect to positive negative scenarios point of view. By handling all these scenarios, like exception handling point of view, whatever it is, positive scenario, bad data, good data point of view, I will implement the REST service. But I will never think like how this REST service will be integrated by the other team member and all. I will not think about it. But as a backend developer, as a Spring Boot developer, sometimes, okay, we have to call someone else REST APIs. That means our Spring Boot application becomes as a consumer. Our Spring Boot application will become as a consumer, and we should call someone else REST APIs. So we are going to call someone else REST APIs by someone else REST API. For example, assume you are calling that Razor Pay APIs, payment gateway APIs from your application, for payment gateway integration from your application. So here at that time again, it's our headache how to consume those REST services. That means they will give you the document, they will give you all the information. Like even last time also we saw that they will give you the what are the API URLs you have to trigger, what is the method, HTTP method, or what are the JSON payloads and all. They will share all the information with us. But by following that information, we have to start writing a logic for consuming the service. So at that time, as a Spring Boot developer, as a Java backend developer, we should have knowledge of how to call consume the REST services of someone else. So in this case, you are not implemented. We are not implementing any REST service. In the specific scenario point of view, we are calling someone else REST services. We are calling REST services. We are calling REST services. So we are not implementing, but we are calling someone else REST APIs. So how to do that? We will see that. I'll take later one point of time. So what I'm trying to say is, but when you are implementing as a producer application, so that means whenever you created whenever we are implementing the REST service, right? So then then in such scenario, your application, you are behaving as a producer. So as a producer, you have to fulfill the requirement and you have to test everything by passing this JSON payloads, positive scenarios, negative scenarios point of view. You have to test and make sure your service is ready to integrate, to consume like that. Okay. So as a backend developer, for example, I'm the backend developer, right? So my work always goes like this. Whenever I got a requirement with respect to front end and back end point of view, we will discuss very clearly what are the parameters we have to take, what are the JSON properties we have to take, what are the values. We will have one value, single value, or more than one value, then considering into as an array. Like that, we will discuss all the details and we will start implementing the REST service. Whenever I am implementing the REST service like this, what I will do, so for the testing point of view, what I will do is I'll always utilize Postman. So I'll make the property names, JSON payload property names, modifying here based on the Java point of view. All this manipulation and all I'll do via Postman. So that means my my entire testing happens always via Postman only. So now everything is good. All the data is getting inserted into database. Whenever I'm giving wrong data, or whenever I'm giving same email ID, then my REST service logic is saying like that is email ID is already existed. Like that, whenever I'm done with all my implementation, then I'll say like my API is ready. My service is ready to consume. My service is ready to integrate. And then I will share all this. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. So and then I will share all this information to the front end team or whoever want to call our REST services. We will share this information with them. Like that, we are going to implement the REST services. Okay, now today's topic is all about request body validation. So yesterday we are done with JSON property annotation. So why especially we will use JSON property annotation? Whenever we are having JSON property is different and Java property is different, to consolidate both as a same property, intermediate annotation, we will take one annotation called as JSON property. So that means what is the advantage with this is, so when your JSON property level, you are using something like, we take an example yesterday, right? First name. But when I'm taking to the Java point of view, with my standards Java point of view, I'm taking it as first name. So then both are different words. JSON property is different, Java property is different. So then your request body will mapping will not happen. Mapping will fail. Mapping will fail. So why? When Jackson converter is converting, when Jackson is converting from JSON payload to Java, Java to JSON point of view, vice versa. Even vice versa point of view also, what will happen? The mapping will fail. Why? Both are different names. Similarly, if I take an, okay, if I taken for example mail, and here I taken as the email ID. So both are, mail is a different word, email ID is a different word. But I want to use it as a email ID only, but JSON point of view, I have to use it as a mail only. So in this case also mapping will fail. Then what we can do? So in such scenario, we are using the annotation called as JSON property annotation. And this JSON property we will use especially at JSON to Java point of view, right? Yeah, so JSON property we have to use always at Java side. Annotation, right? Annotation is nothing but Java only. So by using JSON annotation, what we used to do is, here we will define like, yeah. So on the variable level, you will define like JSON property of, you will give that value JSON property name. So that means you are using this JSON property annotation and you are saying like, for this Java property, this is the equivalent JSON property. So then Jackson will understand very easily. Whenever it is identifying the first name, so it will observe, annotation point of view, it is observe the first name, first underscore name. Yeah, then it will consider as a Java property. So like that, we will utilize the JSON property annotation when you are having mismatching between, I mean, whenever we are having separate JSON property name and as well as the Java property name. Now see here, email ID as well as mail I given. So in this case, in the email ID variable level, I will give like mail. So that means JSON point of view mail, Java point of view email ID. So mapping, you are confirming, you are giving the intermediate extra information, like this is the mapping between this JSON property to Java property, like that. So in such cases, we will use the JSON property. That is what example we taken yesterday. So here, phone number, all this. Okay. So continuation to that, we have one more important topic, request body validation. So what is a request body validation? Let's understand, here it is. This is also one of the regular real-time scenario. Let's understand. Okay. So the point here it is, for example, whenever we are filling some front-end level, I mean, actually we are REST service we are implementing in the backend, but I'm just taking a small real-time example point of view. First name, last name, email ID, password, submit button. Okay. And then here you have something like name, email, password, and mobile. Now, these four values person will enter and he will click on submit. Now assume you are not entered your name. You are entered only email ID and password and mobile, and you are clicking on the submit. So is it a invalid case? Is it a valid or invalid scenario? In that scenario, is it a valid or invalid? So definitely invalid. Why? Because definitely we have to make sure the person is entering always a name. The person is always entering a name. We have to make sure it. So that means it's a mandatory field. What? It's a mandatory field. Required field, mandatory field, right? So it's all what we used to do. So we will implement it as a mandatory field. Nothing but it's a required field. So same behavior we given for everything because these are all mandatory. For example, assume I have one more column, something like city. You assume it is a Gmail account or whatever it is. I'm asking city. So in this scenario, I thought like for me city is not that much important. Okay. So city, I can ask them. I can ask the person once user account is created. I can ask him later also. But means while creating user account, while creating this, out of five columns, sorry guys. Yeah, out of five values, four are mandatory, four are required, and city is optional. Maybe the person is entered, I'll accept it. If the person is not entered, I'm okay with that. Like that, we have the real-time requirements, right? We used to see this behavior in lot of web applications. Yeah. So similarly, login also. So with respect to login also, what we will do? User ID, password, login button. So in this case also, this is mandatory, this is mandatory. A person entering user ID and a person entering password, both are mandatory, right? So if a person not entered the password, he entered only user ID and clicking on login, we will not allow him. Or a person entered only password but not user ID, we will not allow him. The moment he entered both the information, then only we'll make a login, right? So this is all front end point of view. Similarly, when it comes to REST API implementation point of view also, sometimes what we have to do is we have to identify we have to identify okay, as per we have to identify which properties are mandatory always, and which are mandatory, which are optional always, which are mandatory and which are optional, which are optional always. So as a API developer, what we have to do? We have to identify based on the requirement point of view. So for example, if we take a sign up only. In this case, I told you first name is mandatory, last name is mandatory, password is mandatory, email ID is mandatory. Okay, phone number is phone number is not mandatory. Or maybe phone number also mandatory, but address and pin code are not mandatory. So that means what is my requirement here? It is when I am implementing a REST API, if a person given first name, last name, password, email ID, phone number point of view, and he did not give an address and pin code, yes, it's a valid. I am accepting it. So it's required fields, not required fields, not mandatory. Point number one. Okay. Okay. So yeah. So let's take these properties only. I'll instead of something else. So what I said now, based on this requirement point of view, in this case, it's an optional. I said first name, yeah. So in this case, the first name is required, last name is required, password is also required, email ID is also required, phone number is also required, address and pin code optional. Not required means optional. Optional. Rule number one. So what I mentioned as of now, rule number one is except mm, address and pin code, remaining all are mandatory. Point number one. Remaining all are mandatory. Okay, cool. So this is the rules I am giving you. Based on that, you have to create a REST service. Based on that, you have to create a REST service like that. Second point, what I am mentioning is with respect to first name and last name. Okay. So please make sure all required fields. How many required fields in this case? All, that means first name, last name, password, email ID, phone number, right? Total 5 fields. Total 7 you have. 7 out of 7, total 7 in this case, and 5 are mandatory. 5 are required. 2 are optional. That is what the first point is saying. Optional. Okay, that is what the first point is saying. Second point, what I'm trying to say is, please make sure all required properties, values are always not null and not empty. Not null and not empty. So what is my second point here? It is all required fields, point values should not be null, should not be empty. That means a person did not given space like this. For example, for the first name point of view, in the JSON property level, like first underscore name, right? So he given colon null. So that means he did not provided the value. That means it's a null. So in this case, my point of view, first name is a required. Okay. And as well as it should not be null. It should have some value. It should have some value. So that means it's an invalid value. And second scenario, related to same property, I'll take first underscore name. He given like this. Okay, double quotes, space. What is this, guys? Space is only he given. Okay, not even, there is no value. He given only space. That means again, what is the point? Invalid value, right? This is also invalid value. So that means in this case, I should not accept this overall request. See, generally what will happen if you go to any websites, if you are not entered one value, they will not allow you, even though you entered 10 values, one value is wrong. Let's take Gmail sign up. Everybody, we used to do this, right? Create an account for my personal use. See here, first name, last name optional. They are very clearly mentioning optional. So optional means what? You may enter or may not enter. You may give empty, you may give null, no problem. But mandatory one is you should not make sure. See here, I'm giving optional one as something else, but I'm clicking on next. What they are doing? They are not allowing. What is the point in this case? Invalid request, invalid data. So why first name is empty? You are not entered any value. You are not entering any value. So like that. Okay. So that is the point of things I am trying to say. So same rule I given like this. Now point number 3. One more point. Like that, all this what I said, please make sure all required properties values are always not null and not empty. So that means now the person entered first. Okay, let's take like this. Pin, okay, password is null, not allowed. Now I given password Dilip123. Okay, it's a valid. So that means in this case, this value is valid value. Why? It's not null, it's not empty. He is having providing some real value, a good value. So that means password is a good thing. First name is a bad thing. But overall, bad request. See, that means now a person given like this. Okay, let's take data directly from here. Now a person entered data like this. Null. So it's a valid request overall means 100% no. In this case, it's a valid, invalid. Invalid request. How I am saying that it is an invalid request? The reason is based on my requirement, first name is a mandatory property and value is mandatory, but this guy entered null. So because of this one value, it became invalid. It became invalid. Now again, so after that, one more request came like this, and he given like this. Now is it a valid or invalid? Invalid. How can I say like it is a invalid? Because of one small property, the entire request is an invalid request. How? Mail ID format is not correct. Mail ID will have some format at the rate .com, something like that, at the rate symbol. These are all things will be there. Dot symbol, all that. So it's not a mail format. So that's why it's a invalid. Now, I'll take one more request format. Okay. Yeah. Now in this case, um, I given like this. I given like this. Now it's a valid, 100% is valid. The request body is valid in this case. After that, processing is different. First of all, you are validating the request based on the requirement point of view. So in this scenario point of view, now if I applying these two rules, is it a valid? 100% is valid. Why? All five fields are there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All five fields are having a real values. Suresh XYZ, Suresh 111, and even mail ID is also correct format. Phone number is also correct format. So that's why it's a valid. But there is no property for what? Address and pin code. Yes, that's what I said, right? It's an optional. So that means they may give, they may not give it. But I can't make sure it's a mandatory like that. So that is what the point here it is, Gmail point of view also. If I given the moment here something like Dilip Singh, okay, first name, and if I'm not giving, if I'm giving something, they will accept. If I'm giving, it's moving to the next. Even though if I'm not giving also, they will accept. Why? It's an optional, right? So like that. So in this case also, that's what the reason here it is. So that means in this overall process, what you are understanding is whenever a request came from the client will send always request, a client application, maybe whoever it is. As a API developer, sometimes we have to take care of validation also, request body validation. So that means in this case, this client sending this data, client sending this data as a request to the backend application, Spring Boot application, or whatever it is. In our case, Spring Boot application, and we are implementing the REST service fee. So yeah, REST service we are implementing here. So what will happen? The moment you got JSON data, internally, what I said, Jackson API, right? So Jackson API generally what it will do? It will convert immediately. All property names are matching or not, it will observe. Everything is good, then it will make a Java object based on the request body annotation. So you will create a Java class and you will give request body annotation for a Java class, right? So based on that, what will happen? A body object will be created, and finally, first name equal to Suresh, last name equal to XYZ, like that. You will make sure that. And then you will send it to service layer, you will send it to repository layer, and finally it will go to the DB. This is the story we are understanding from last 2 weeks. Service, repo, and all. This is the story. Okay, this is the story we are understanding. But the thing is here, before accepting the request as a valid request, first of all, I have to verify this guy given all proper data or not. See, when you are applying the applications in the government jobs or some other jobs, what they will do first, they will validate your data. Your data is correct or not. You entered all the data correct or not. If everything is good, then they will say like, okay, come to next round, come to next level, go to next process, next counter, like that. So that means you have to validate the content. So based on my requirement point of view, what I mentioned, 5 fields are mandatory, 2 are optional. So based on that satisfaction, based on that, he given everything correct. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values he provided, and that too everything in the right format. No not nulls, not empty. And he will given optional also. So that's okay. So that means it's a valid. Then only I'll make request being okay accepted as a valid. So that means valid, I'm identifying it as a valid request body. Valid request body. Then I'll make it next actions. Next action. Like sending data to service layer, and then I'll verify that email ID is already earlier given or not. So these are all details. I'll do that. Next action. But the moment a person came again, I mean, not a person, so something, a request came like this. So second use case point of a request came like this. What he did, he missed mail ID. So he did not send mail ID property itself. What happened in this case? It's whenever it is validating the request body, what happened? It's a invalid request body. So it's a invalid. The moment if it is a invalid, how we are saying like it is a invalid? Mail ID is missing. So that means you can't perform next action. You should not allow that request as a valid request. That, I mean, you have to make sure it as an invalid request, and you have to give response immediately back to the client. Like the moment it is a invalid, it's a bad request. It's a bad request. Reason also you can provide. We will provide the reasons also. So we'll say like mail ID is missing. Mail ID is missing. Like that, we have to implement the REST API. So this is all I'm talking about backend, guys. So as a backend developer, we have to take care of validation sometimes. Okay, most of the times we have to write validations also for basic validations, required properties, required formats, all this point of view, required length, all this level, we have to make sure that. Now, next one more rule I have added here. What it is third rule is first name and last name values should be greater than file size. File size. So that means they should enter minimum 5 characters. Should be greater than 5 size, and max 40. Max 40. So that means if I given first name, now the request came like this, first name colon ABC. What is the problem in this case? It's all about 3 characters, but I am expecting minimum 5 characters. So it's an invalid request. Now again, same person, last name underscore, I mean last name point of view given this much length of data. Now in this case, what is the problem? It is greater than 40 characters. So that means invalid. So these are all rules I am defining while I am implementing the REST API. I mean, while you are implementing the REST API, you have to satisfy all these rules. That means nothing but what you are doing is you are validating the request body. So the overall scenario, what you are doing, we have to implement. So as a developer, what we have to do is we have to implement validation of request body. Based on the rules and regulations, you have to make sure applying the validation. So then if all validations are passed, then request is a valid request. Nothing but, okay, the request body is valid and proceed for logic execution. That is what. If one of the validation is failed, if one of the validation is failed, if one of the if one of the validation is failed, then request is a invalid request. Nothing but request body is invalid and don't proceed for logic execution. That means next logic execution, as well as return response immediately to client as bad request with reason. So why it is a bad request? So that means you're saying like, sorry man, you are not given first name as expected, or email ID you are not given as expected. Like that you have to send a reason and you have to inform him as a client. You are informing back to the client as a bad request. So that's why you are not allowing him to do the executing the logic, controller logic, service logic control. So that kind of validations is possible in the REST API implementation means yes. So how to do that? Let's see here. So what you have to do this kind of validations, what you have to do, let's try to understand. I'll do one thing. Okay. So yeah, I'll utilize same example only instead of creating new project and all. It's a small thing only. Let's do what we have to do. Point number one. First, add a starter of validation. By default, validation. See, we are already have validation framework, but by default, validation framework is not available as part of the Spring Web module or Spring Boot Web module. So that's why what you have to do is add a starter of validation to our application, into our application form.txt, into application. So that means what you have to do, starter means what? Maven dependency. So go and identify a Maven dependency. Uh, so I'll give request body validation in Spring Boot dependency. I want only dependency. Spring Boot validation dependency starter. See, by default, you will not found in the this level, guys. When you are creating the project, like Swagger point of view, you added externally, right? Like that. When you are creating the project, the moment you given all the values, you will select here DevTools web, right? Similarly, if you are trying to look for validation point of view, validation with Hibernate. This is all about Hibernate validator. Okay, let's do one thing. Don't take this, but let me do one thing. I'll check what is the form.xml level, what is being added. I want to check it, but actually it is all about this one we have to take. Yeah, this one you can take. Version you can keep no problem, or you can remove also no problem, because it will take the default Spring Boot version. Yeah, so this is the generally Spring Boot starter validation. This is the validation. This is the dependency you have to add to our project. But if you take in directly Hibernate one, what it is taking? Oh, okay. It's there in the project also. So I think recently it's being added. I'm not sure. Okay, it's there. Maybe when you are creating project for the first time, You can select validation directly from this, guys. Okay. Um, it's okay. Let's do one thing. I'll create a new project. Nothing will happen. But very quickly I'll do it. I'll do copy paste also. Okay. So see here, I'm creating the project. Even if it is existing project, just add it. That's all you have to do. Add it. Or while creating the project also, you can utilize this option. File, new Spring Starter project. And I'll give REST services, JSON, payload, validation. Okay, I'm taking DevTools. If you want to involve Lombok, JPA, web, driver, validation. So just take the validation. Next, finish it. Okay, so what I will do, I'll just copy paste all the information quickly. Payload validation. Yeah, this is what. Hmm. Okay, cool. And then, yeah, so let's take a controller class first. I'll do one thing. You know all these stories. That's why I'm not copy pasting the code. User controller point of view, I'll take. See, I just created controller class, nothing much. Give me a second, guys. Just a second. Yeah, sorry. So sorry. Okay, so let's take a class also. I'll take like user sign up request as my class name. So it's all about request. Okay, let's create this class now. Create class user and I'll create inside the request package. Sorry guys, I don't know this. Okay. So it's just like request class. Let me copy paste these values directly from here instead of I'm okay. So I just taken the properties from here only. I'll remove this. This you know that now. Okay. So total 7 properties as per our requirement point of view. Fine. Now this is the request class and it is a controller class. Okay, cool. So now my application is ready. And what I will do is user created successfully. Okay. Yeah. So let's take this first without validation. What will happen? And then we'll try to implement the validation. So as of now, I'm not validating this request body. Your project level, you added a dependency called as validation. But at this API, individual API level, as of now, I did not implemented any validation. No validation on this service. As of now, no validation on this service. Okay. So see here, whenever the validation, once you applied the validation, validation got failed, then this controller method logic will not execute, guys. For example, see here, sysout in controller sending data to service layer plus request. You can take like this and go to request class. What I will do, I'll remove all this. I will add Lombok annotation because I have Lombok support, right? Data. Okay. So cool. Now what will happen? As of now, no validation. Then automatically what will happen? Let's test first. Okay, cool. Validation. This is the API. Sorry, this is the service we created. Now go back to the Postman. I'll take same thing. First name, last name. What is the next property name we taken? As it is, we have to take, right? Email ID and phone number. Yeah. So I given all this information and what is my API? Slash double eight double nine slash API only. So double eight double nine slash API. Okay, cool. After that, controller class slash user slash sign up slash user. Yeah. So okay, it's all right. Now let me send the request. See here, what happened? User create. Okay, leave it. Observe here the validation. So that means you given everything right, and the rest of the logic is executed. You are sending to the service layer, then assume like the data went to service and pass it to DB, and mapping is also happened. First name Suresh, XYZ, password, all this thing. Now in this case, I'm missing first name. I'm missing the first name. Send the request. Still, what happened? Observe. Even though client didn't send first name, you are accepting in your API call, your API in the backend, accepting that first name as a, yeah, let's take like this. Yeah. So if you observe here, you are accepting it as a first name equal to null. But what is our requirement right now? I said it's a mandatory field. The moment they are not given first name, they missed or they given null or empty, whatever it is, you have to fail it. So that means if you observe the payload, if you taken this payload based on our requirement point of view, what we understood right now is all about invalid. If you taken this payload, why it's a invalid? We have to make it as a invalid. Invalid. What is the reason? First name is missing, but it is a mandatory required field, right? So that's why it's miss. First name is missing. That's why it's a invalid. But still, your request is accepting as a valid request. Now see here. if I'm missing all the properties, what happened? Still, your request is taking as a success request. All are taking as nulls. So that means there is no validation as of now. So to avoid these problems, okay, what we used to do is generally we have to make sure validation. Now apply the validation. After applying the validation, how it will work, and as part of validation, what you have to do. Let's see here. So now, while applying the validation at a individual REST service level, with respect to a request body, you have to use an annotation called as second step is, see, this is one time work in the project. You will add dependency at project in the pom.xml. So nothing but add in pom.xml. If it is an ongoing project, if it is for the first time you are creating, select that validation, then this is coming automatically, right? So this is coming automatically. If you see here, yeah, Spring Boot starter validation, Spring Boot starter validation. This is coming automatically. I mean, if you are selecting that validation option from the list, okay, that is clear. Now, second step, what you have to do is whenever we want to validate a specific request body of a service, we have to use an annotation. We have to use an annotation called as @valid. What is that annotation is @valid. So this annotation, point number 3, this annotation should be used along with along with request body annotation. Request body annotation should be used along with request body annotation. This annotation should be used along with the request body annotation. Now that means where you have to use is, come back to our application, go to our controller class, close project. Yeah, so go to the controller class. So here you have request body, right? This is the thing we are expect. Okay, here you have request body. So on behalf of request body, you will use @valid. Before the request body, what you are using? Here you are using valid annotation. So if you see here, this annotation coming from Jakarta validation. So nothing but Java only. Internally, they are using some Java specifications only for this validation point of view. So you are using where this annotation at this level. So for example, you have to take care. So here, along with request body, before the request body, you have to use valid. So now what is the meaning of this one is, now you are telling to the controller layer, hey controller layer, whenever you got a request for the sign up operation, please validate the request body. Please validate the request body. So if it is, sorry. So if it is valid, if it is valid, if it is valid, nothing but all validations are passed, then allow to execute the logic. Allow to execute logic. If not valid, that means at least one of the validation is failed. That means it's an invalid request, right? Then don't allow, execute the logic. Immediately send a bad request. Send like send like bad request to whom? Client. So that means you're not allowing to execute rest of the logic. You're simply giving immediately response back to the client like, hey man, validation is failed due to so and so reason, like that. You're giving response back to the client. If you are removing this, again, what's happening in this scenario? You are not asking the controller to validate the request. So what controller will do is, okay, a payload came, it will try to map here. Some of the properties are missing, still it is mapping as null, and it is proceeding with the logic execution like this in the existing whatever is happened earlier. So to enable validation, the first step is what you have to do? Valid annotation. Valid annotation you have to use. The moment you given valid annotation, what it will start is, it will start validating your request body. It will start validating your request body. Now see here, you send the request, you got the data, that's okay. All are presented. Now I removed first name and last name. So first name, last name missing. Still it is matching. Still it is, if you observe here, first name null, last name null. Why? You given valid. But still why it is allowing request and you are able to see this line output. So that means you are able to see this line output means your request is a valid request. So request is valid, nothing but. Request is valid. So that means how you given valid, but still how it is a valid request. What we discussed, out of 7 properties, 5 are mandatory, 2 are optional. But where you define that rule? Like out of 7 properties, what are the 7 properties? First name, last name, password, email ID. So these 5 are mandatory, these 2 are optional. But we are not defined something, right? So we are asking controller level, please validate the request body. But in the request body level, we are not mentioned which is a valid one, which is a invalid, I mean, which is a required one, which is a optional one. So that means step number 3, what you have to do is add validation annotations at request body properties level. Request body class properties level. Add validation annotations at request body class properties level. Add specific validation annotations at request body class properties level. So that means go to the request body. Yeah, go to the controller. So validating request body, and in this Java class, finally Jackson will map the data, right? So before mapping itself, here you have to utilize some annotations. What are those annotations is, if you see here, I am using some annotations, not null. And please use always from the Jakarta dot annotation, guys. Sometimes what will happen, you will see same annotation from different packages, but we have to choose specific package. So in this case, please use Jakarta dot annotations only. If you see here, Lombok, micrometer, Jakarta, Lombok, Spring, you are already have all this, right? So let's take Jakarta one. Okay. So if you see here, the annotated element must not be null. And if you second this one also, it's a same thing. Internally again they are using all that Jackson or all these things point of view. Leave it. But you can take Jakarta only. So see here, this is what. Now observe this scenario, what will happen. I just added one annotation at first name level. At a first name level, right? Save it. Now send the same request as it is. I'm missing the first name now, last name also. Now see what you got, bad request. Error you got as a bad request. Add a specific, that's what I said. We have a lot of specific validations, guys. Okay. I'll give you you can identify the list easily, not a big deal. Not null for null to avoid null. So similarly, not empty. Similarly, at the rate email. Like that, you have etc. etc. You have some couple of annotations we have to use. Now see what it is saying, bad request. What is the meaning of bad request? You are not given all the values, expected values. Client didn't send expected values. Now see here, I given first name again. Send the request. It's a valid request. And go and observe the output now. If you see here now, this time you saw that line. Sysout is printed, request is valid. If I am missing the first name again, what? Bad request. And if you observe here, you can't see that sysout being printed. That means what happened? Controller started validating the request body. So the moment request came here, by seeing this annotation, controller started validating the request. So it opened this request class and it observed which is a not non-null column is all about first name. So what it does is immediately first name is available in the request or not. not available. That's why it is saying bad request. See the reason also here. What is this? Cannot construct instance of user sign up request. Problem is first name is marked as not null. What is the error you got? This is the error you got. So you got error as a bad request, 400 bad request. It will be called as, what is a 400 and all, you will come to know that in some time. For time being, just remember as a bad request. See, bad request, the reason is first name is marked as non-null, but it is null value. Okay, cool. Now, what I will do, go to the request. I'll give first name and I'm missing last name. But my requirement point of view, last name, password, email ID, phone number, all are mandatory. But I'm sending the request. See, user created successfully. Why, how? Last name, email ID, password, all these are missing, but still it is accepting. Why is you applied validation only for the first name. You are not applied for the last name. So whatever the fields are mandatory, go there and add it. Not, see, not null. You can take here also not null. Yeah, not null you can take directly. And how many you observed? I mean, as per our requirement, 5. Not null. Not null. Now these two are mandatory. We should not touch these two. Why? We decided these two are mandatory. So now go and send the request again. Earlier you got this right. Now let's send the request. What happened? Bad request. Why? Go and observe the reason. They are giving lot of reasons. Why it is a bad request? They given lot of errors like, first thing is last name field point of view must not be null. Last name should not be null. Email ID point of view must not be null. Password point of view must not be null. So that means now client knows that, oh, okay, I'm missing email ID, password, I'm sending as null values like that. Now if I given again, only last name I'm missing. Sorry, let's send all the data user created successfully. So that means you're accepting it as a request is valid. Request is valid. Yeah. So you're accepting request is a valid. Now I'm missing only email ID. Only email ID. Now see the reason. Yes, finally email ID is a not null column. We added as a not null. Okay, that's the reason it is saying like bad request. And if you observe the reason, it is saying like this time email ID is missing. Email ID must not be null. Must not be null. So you give an email ID. Okay, cool. Now let's observe here. First name point of view, I am giving what guys? Empty. Or let's pass null only, directly null. In JSON, you can pass null guys directly. I discussed this point in JSON point of view. See here, why null? You given first name, last name, password, email ID, phone number, and everything. But still null is you sent first name value as null only. First name must not be null, but you sent null. That's right. So if you are missing the property or if you are given directly as a null value, both are same. Both will be considered as null value. So that's why valid request is an invalid body. Invalid request body. That's why see if you see here, this line is not printing. That means what you can understand. So the rest of the logic is not executing. The request is not going to the service layers. All this not happening. That's what I said here it is. The moment if it is a request valid, then you will allow to the service layer and I mean simply will allow to execute controller layer logic and as well as immediately service and everything. But the moment it is a invalid, no next action. That means you will not allow to execute controller method itself that means it will not call any service and all. So when the moment you realized it as a, so who is doing all these things, guys? This newly added dependency. This framework is doing internally all these things. This starter internally, this logic is doing all these things internally. Okay, now next rule. Next point of view, what I'm doing is observe this scenario. I'm giving value. Okay, if you observe here, I'm giving the value, first name value, not null. I'm giving the property as well as I'm giving the value also. Okay, but what is the value? Spaces I'm giving. Send it, accept it. Why? But my requirement is saying what? It should not be empty. It should not be empty. If you go to the data also, what is the first name, guys? If you observe here, empty. It's an invalid scenario, right? Definitely we should expect always a value, but it is came as empty. Earlier it is dealing with null, but this time empty is coming. So that's why what you have to do is go to the first name, add one more annotation, not empty. Not empty jakarta.validations.constraints. Save it. Now send the request again. Same request with empty value. Okay, give me a second. I think some other annotation is there. Not blank we can take. Yeah. So in this case, see, this is the annotation I'm taking. Not blank I taken. See what happened? Bad request. Why? The first name value went as a blank. First name value went as a blank. So that's why what it is saying, first name value must not be blank. That is our, that is our. So see here now, if I am sending null, it's a invalid. If I am missing one of the property, it's a invalid. If I am sending property and not null, but it is a empty, then also bad request. So that means if I until and unless I'm giving the real value, so Dilip I given something. Now see here, all are good. So first name point of view, last name point of view, everything is good. So like that, you have to add specific validation annotations at specific properties level. So two things you have to remember. Now can you guess and tell me if I remove this valid annotation, what will happen? Save it. Still I have validation annotations on the property level, but I removed, I at the rate validate this API level here. Then what will happen? If I am missing the first name property, see here, user created successfully. If I am missing all properties, are user created successfully. So that means to enable the validation, to switch on the validation, you have to use always valid annotation along with request body. So if you, so that means if I created one more REST service like sign up point of view version 2 or whatever it is, user register something, whatever it is. Now in this case, for this, no validation, no request body validation, no request body validation. But in this case, request body validation is existed. Why at the rate valid you used, but here there is no at the rate valid. So the moment you use sign up now, all validation coming into the picture, whatever the validations you defined here. So see here, now see again bad request. If I given slash v2, user created successful. Why? Same Pojo class only. Same Pojo class only, but why validations are not happened? You are not switching on validation here. You switched off the validation. Nothing but you are not provided this annotation. If you provide again at the rate valid here, then again what will happen? Based on that annotation, based on what you defined inside the Pojo level, in the request body class level, what will happen? Send the request now again. See, this is also saying bad request. If you want to disable the validation, remove it. That's all. Now these are all became dummy. I mean dummy in the sense with respect to this REST service point of view, these are all not working. But the same thing are working with respect to this annotation again. This service point of view, even though class is same class. Okay, cool. So user created V2 because we switched off the validation for the V2 point of view. Now let's remove V2, send it, bad request. The reason is all the properties are missing. Okay. Now all are good. Fine. Now observe the point. I given only A, first name, last name B. But what is my requirement? The moment I given the requirement to you, I said minimum 5 values and maximum 40. But I am giving only one. Okay, let's do one thing. First name I given one, last name I given more than 40 characters. More than 40 characters. Now understand what will happen. Still user is created successfully. If you go and observe the data, yeah. If you observe now, what happened? The first name is having a character. Last name is having more than 40 characters. But my requirement is saying very clearly if a client sending minimum one less than 5 characters and greater than 40 characters, so you have to reject that request. It's as an invalid request. Now in this case, due to first name point of view, I have to make sure it is an invalid request. Due to last name also, I have to make sure it is an invalid request. In this scenario also. One more validation, third validation, then what you have to do. So go here, go to the request body, which property? First name and last name I said, right? Especially for first name and last name. So here you will have something min. Yeah, Jakarta dot validation min. So, and here you have to define the size. So if you see here value, what is the value? What is the minimum size? 5. And message also you can give guys. Okay, you can give your own message also. If you see here, message equal to please make, okay, first name should be, I can give like this. First name should be minimum 5 characters. First name should be minimum 5 characters. First name should be minimum 5 characters. So save it. Now see, send the request again. Now see first name point of view what you will get. Bad request. Observe the reason. What it is saying, first name is the variable name. Rejected value is A. You given A value, right? That is what rejected. Why? The reason is first name should be minimum 5 characters. First name should be minimum 5 characters. Now client realized, oh, okay, let me give 5 characters. Okay, let's give like minimum 5 characters. Dilip is the 5 characters. Still, 5 means it, okay, greater than 5, 6 point of view. Like if I given one more extra character, see here. Sorry, okay, sorry, this is the problem. Okay, this is also, I'll give like Dilip Singh, Dilip and Singh, 5 characters. See, it is accepting, it's not accepting 5. I given 6 and I given some more what 6 also. What is the reason? First name should be minimum 5 characters. Okay, let's define max also. Let's see that. So min we defined. Similarly, let's define max also because we have to define max at the rate max. Max is we decided like 40 characters. Up to 40 characters. Why? What is the problem? Rejected value Dilip Singh. First name should be minimum 5 characters. Yes, I given. Give me a second. I'll this annotations. What are the annotations available? I'll tell you. Max, minimum, not blank. Message payload class value long value the element must be higher or equal to. That's what we given, right? Okay, give me a second. I'm not sure why it is failing. Jakarta validation constraints. Yeah, value one. Okay, so that means can't we use these properties? It's not like that. We will see it later. We don't want to waste our time. I'll see. Any annotation change. Min and max we can provide. Jakarta. Supported types big decimal, big integer. Who mentioned 5.0? Is it working, Venkatesh? You mentioned as 5.0 something. Value, long value. Then without checking, how will you say? What is this? Okay, I'll check this later and I'll come back. What is happening must be greater than or equal to 5. Must be greater than or equal to 5. Okay, we given more than that. Okay, leave it. We will see that why max and min point of view. I'll give you hint tomorrow. But let's see what we can discuss other things. For example, if you see the email ID, you have something like email also. If you are added email, if you observe the annotation called as email annotation at the rate email. So what it will ensure is if you don't have email ID, okay, leave at the min and max, guys. I'll come back and later. So leave it. At least you have an idea, right? So that's most important, more enough. But really, what is and all, we'll see later. What's happening, problem and all, I'll encounter. I'll figure it out. Now see here, mail ID point of view, I've given Suresh123. So what is this? It's an invalid mail ID, right? Actually. So how do you restrict that? A mail ID, basic mail ID syntax is being followed. So that means you can enable again. You can add email annotation at email property level. So now what it will ensure is, it will ensure this is a email property. See, it's a bad request. Why? See here, email ID point of view, what it is saying is given value is Suresh123. It is rejected because must be a well-formed email address. Must be a well-formed email address. Now I given only at the rate Gmail. See here again, okay, it is somewhat accepting. That's what I'm telling you. Sometimes couple of annotations, very basic annotations they used to give in the backend. They cannot give 100%. See, actually this is also not a valid email ID, but still it is accepting. So still it is accepting. We have something like .com, .info, something like that, right? That's what. But still it is accepting. It is just looking for only at the rate symbol, I think. Then generally people will go with regular patterns, regex, regular expressions. So I'll teach what is a regular expression tomorrow. I mean, not required also. If I given again Dilip, invalid. The moment you given at the rate, and they are just after at the rate, they are looking for some characters. That's all. But they're not looking for .com, .info. At least dot symbol should be there. Every email ID point of view, you will have a domain that they are not validating here. So I don't know what is the reason also. But anyway, in future, if you want to make some okay validations point of view, you will do all these things, guys. Similarly, you can observe what are the validations you have: email, max, min, not blank, not empty, not null. And similarly, this assertions not required, decimal max, all these things not required. Negative value. So what? See this. What is this annotation is saying? The annotated property must be strictly a negative number. So assume sometimes you want to allow a number only negative number. Then you can use this annotation. Okay, something like maybe some anything else. Some negative numbers you are accepting. Only negative numbers should be accepted. So that means client should send only negative number. So then you can add this validation. Then it will take only, then it will, if you given only negative number, it will accept. It will, if you are giving positive number, it will not accept. In case if you want to include zero also, then you have to use this annotation. That means the property must be a negative number or zero. If you given -1, accepted. -1000, accepted. 0, accepted. But if you given 1, it will not accept it. Like that. Okay. So the moment when you want to allow only null, only null, you don't want, you are not expecting any value, client must and should pass only null. Reverse to this requirement, not null to reverse. So that means I am expecting always address value as null only. Even though client is giving Hyderabad, I should not, I have to fail it now. I have to make it as an invalid request. Why? I am not expecting any value for address. For address point of view, I want only null. Then you can add null. Then you can add null. Like that, based on the requirement point of view, you are going to add this validation annotations. But why this min, min and max is not working, I'm not sure. Okay, let's try. I think at the rate size also. No size. Okay, I think size here you can provide min and max. I think, yeah, min and max. I can provide minimum 5, max equal to 40, and then message equal to first name should be minimum 5 characters and max up to 40. You can write meaningful messages. Okay, up to 40. Same rule applicable for last name also. Not null, not blank, and same rule. Same password point of view also. It should not be not null. It should not be not blank. And as well as password point of view, I'll change the size. It should be minimum 5, maximum 20 characters only. Yeah, maximum 20. And so here you can change the last name, password should be minimum 5 and maximum up to 20. Size characters what you can write. Okay, so like that, let's try this. And email ID, okay, you can apply. Phone number point of view also, you can do that. Okay, save it. Let's try now. I given Dilip. Okay, all are good. Okay, cool. If I given less than 4 characters, yeah, you got bad request this time. Yeah, first name should be minimum 5 characters and maximum 40. Yeah, now it is working. I think it is, you have to take only size. So if you take last name now, first name 4 characters rejected. Last name is also rejected. The reason is this time it is having more than 40 characters. So if you given exactly something like this, now greater than 5, less than 40, greater than 5, less than 40, greater than 5, less than 20. So if you given more than 20 characters of password, it will fail. Everything is under the limit now. See, not null, not empty, with less greater than 5, less than 40 characters. 4 validations are applied in this field. Everything is satisfied. It's not a null value, it's not an empty value, and it's not less than 5 characters, not greater than 40 characters. So 4 validations are satisfied. Satisfied, satisfied, satisfied. Everything is satisfied. That's why overall request is a valid request. Overall request is a valid request, and that's why you can see here the data is matching like this. So this is how we are going to provide validations to our APIs. This is how we are going to provide validations to our APIs. So you may ask one question, sir, for example, I want to achieve the proper email ID .com point of view and all. So then you have to use some patterns, guys. Okay, some regular patterns will be there. I think I'm not sure. Yeah, pattern. So in the pattern level, you have to give some regular expression syntaxes. So it's a different story. Regular expressions is a different story. So I'll search in the chat GPT, regex for email IDs. So it just like a prototype. So what it will do is, if you given this, yeah, I given this one now, regex pattern, and see now, I'm removing the email ID, save it. You have to use regex. Similarly, for mobile phone numbers point of view also, you can create your own regexes. So if you need any knowledge, please explore what is a regular expressions like that. It is common across all programming languages, not only here. SQL point of view, Python, .NET, it's a generic concept. So explore it. It's a good thing only. It's a real-time thing only. Get the knowledge. Okay, let's send the request now. Everything is good, right? Now let's remove the @ See what happened? Bad request. Why? It's not following proper email ID syntax. See here, must match. You can write the message there. So you can write something message also, comma, message you can write invalid email ID. Please follow valid email ID syntax, valid email ID, something like that. Please pass valid email ID. Please pass whatever it is. You can write anything. So this is all. Now mobile number point of view also, you know that, right? Mobile numbers, 10 digits, something like that. So you can create your own regular expressions. Phone number regex for Indian country. So you know that it is 10 digits character, 10 digit mobile number plus 91 is the country code, and spaces you sometimes they will give you places, all these things. So this is a regex. Now if you go here, I'll give pattern. So pattern point of view, I'll give this regex. So regular expression. Regex means regular expression. Shortcut point of view, we used to call it as. And you can give message also in case if it is a valid, invalid mobile number format. Something. In case if validation is failed. Now see, save it and then send the request. See, it's a invalid mobile number, right? As per our India country, it's a invalid mobile number. Send it, invalid. Okay, do one thing. You have to make it as a string first because this time you are allowing plus also, right? Plus and space also, right? So that's why you have to consider phone number as a string. Let's do one thing. I'll make phone number as a string because you're allowing plus 91 plus symbol also, right? That's why you have to take string as a phone number as a string. That common sense we should have. See, now it is a bad request. Why? You are not sent it proper valid. Okay, let's make email ID as a valid first. Okay, email ID is valid now, but mobile number point of view, observe here, phone number point of view, you given only 636, this one. So it's a invalid mobile number format. I'm expecting proper format like plus 91 and I'm expecting total 10 digits 7, 8, 9, 10. So I don't know what format exactly it is looking plus 91. I mean, we can tweak that regular expression. It's not like exactly you have to pass something. They are explaining the regular expression also here. They are explaining. For example, they given examples also. Yeah. So let's take this example. They given what is the syntaxes you have to follow, how this regular expression plus 91. Without plus 91 also it is accepting. Okay, cool then. So let me give without plus 91. I think it is not accepting repeated characters. It's obviously true, right? You will never have a repeated characters in the mobile number, mostly. So see here, now it is accepted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. 10 digits. This again, that's what. So it's a strong regular expression created. 25262702. So somewhat it's you can tweak it. So some small problems are there in the regular expression, but you can change the regular expression based according to your needs. So you should know all these formats. So that is how you can enable validations on each and every property level, guys. So what, for example, tomorrow, if I am asking you user login. So user login point of view, you will create a request class, right? One is what login request class point of view, you will take two properties, user ID and password. It's all what login. So that means the moment you take in user ID and password at request body level, you will apply at the rate valid, at the rate request body, and then login, right? So here what you will do, user ID is mandatory always. So that means you will give that syntax, not null, not blank. So you can take this as assignment. Similarly, not null and not blank password also. So you can give this annotation, then automatically login level also, if a person not sending password property, he will get like password is missing, user ID is missing, like that. Here you can pass the messages guys. Okay, not blank. If you see the message from this, you can say that last name should not be blank, like that. You can give our own messages also. So the moment you given last name as a blank, so if you see here, last name should not be blank. That is what I written. Last name should not be blank. So like that, we can give customized messages also. So this is all called as request body validation. Very simple and straightforward. It's all just annotation. Add this dependency, one time work, and after that, whatever the REST API you want to provide the validation with respect to request body, open that request body class and add this annotation specific to your requirement. Specific to your requirement. So like that. So in this case, we are not touched these two. Why optional? That's why there is no validations. Okay, so with this, we are done with validation, how we are applying the validations to the request body level. And if whenever request validation is failed, what's happening? Request validation got success, what's happening? We discussed. Whenever request validation is failed, you will get always error called as bad request status code as 400. So what is a 400 and all? We will see later. So why it is 400 and all? Simply you can call it as a bad request. If it is a good request, then logic will be executed. If it is a bad request, logic will not be executed and you will get the error response like this with the reasons why it is a bad request.